I host a website called The Thinking Atheist. I'm not the thinking atheist. I'm the dumbass who took 30 years to figure out that donkeys couldn't talk, for Pete's sake. But I come from a culture where faith is how you live, right? We walk by faith. And I wanted to create a community where I and everybody within earshot was encouraged to reject faith. And let's think about these things. Just a quick aside before I start, just a quick digression. I just came straight from Seattle. I did a tour stop in Seattle, and we had an amazing time there. And I had a chance to go to the EMP Museum, which has like the Sci-Fi Hall of Fame. And I'm a big sci-fi nut, so I brought a few pictures. There's me in the lobby with the big car up there. And this picture I put online and drove people crazy because the photographer didn't quite center me. I'm a little off, and all the OCD people online just freaked out. I thought this next photograph was a great photograph. We saw Darth Vader on the Star Wars exhibit there, and of course I had to question his religion, which was a real problem. I posted that online, and I received this response from a listener who posted this: Darth Vader believes in ancient religions, accepts the burden of proof, provides a convincing demonstration. That was fantastic. All right, I want to talk today about facts versus ideas. This is something that's kind of been on my mind. And I'm going to start with kind of a hero in the United States. We are all about heroes in many ways, in every part of the world. We tend to fall in love with our heroes. And there was a quote-unquote hero which was depicted in the latest film by Clint Eastwood called American Sniper, a quote-unquote historical look at U.S. Navy SEAL Chris Kyle, the most lethal sniper in U.S. military history. Here's a real photograph of the guy. 4 tours in Iraq, 160 confirmed kills, unconfirmed went well north of 200. 2 silver stars, 5 bronze medals out the yin-yang. He survived a whole bunch of different crashes and wounds and whatnot. Love him or hate him, the guy was kind of a badass, okay? And he wrote down his story in a book, an autobiography called American Sniper, on which the film is based. But Chris Kyle's story has polarized readers and viewers, not just in the U.S., but all around the world. You got people like this guy, Texas Rep. Roger Williams, who said that he's a hero, worthy of our nation's highest military honor. In fact, at Chris Kyle's memorial service on the big Jumbotron screen at Dallas Cowboy Stadium, they said, we are remembering a hero. In fact, I hope I get the information right here, but they had a processional of cars of people traveling to the stadium, and I think it was the longest funeral procession in American history. It was like 100 miles or something crazy, Then you have people like Lindy West, who was writing for The Guardian, who called Chris Kyle a hate-filled killer. Now, I don't really fall into either of those camps, but I looked deeper into the story, right? And I found some issues, some interesting things. The film itself falsely links the attacks of September 11th with the Iraqi War. It falsely shows Chris Kyle joining the Navy SEALs after he saw TV coverage of attacks on our embassies. Kyle had actually applied to the SEALs years earlier and been rejected for various reasons before he finally was later accepted. Falsely claims a $180,000 bounty on his head. Well, there were bounties put on snipers' heads. Snipers were a big pain in the ass to the enemy, so they actually put out bounties, but not just on Kyle, on snipers in general. And the amount was closer to $20,000. The film itself falsely claims Kyle killed Mustafa, the villain, with a capital V. There was a Mustafa in real life, but the Mustafa in the film was kind of a composite of different things, and the big kill shot was actually an anonymous insurgent, enemy, whatever, in real life as well. The film trumped up the entire story. The last 30 minutes are complete fiction. And of course, the movie largely ignores the real story of our involvement in Iraq, for good or for ill. The sectarian conflicts and the innocent who've long suffered under the hand of oppression. Right? We had an idea about Chris Kyle, but the facts seem to be adding up a little bit differently. Then you have stories like this one. It's reported in the Washington Post. Unverifiable reports that Kyle himself allegedly made, where he and a buddy went to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. They took their sniper rifles and picked off looters. I don't remember seeing that in the film about this great American hero. It seems like a rather large omission, as is this. The lawsuit that the Kyle estate just lost former Governor Jesse Ventura. Chris Kyle claimed that he'd punched Jesse Ventura out after Ventura said that our soldiers deserved to die in Iraq. Well, a jury of his peers ruled there was no exchange that ever took place, and Jesse Ventura won against the Kyle estate a $1.845 million settlement. Now that's a really interesting piece of the puzzle. Where is that in the Chris Kyle story? As depicted in the film, he's just a straight-up basic nuts and bolts good guy, right? Fighting on evil. But the real Chris Kyle is much more complex, and his story deserves, I think, to be told in much greater detail. Now, I want to be clear. If you bring up the darker sides of someone, a hero, people become indignant, especially when that hero has died. And I want it clear, I'm not pissing on his grave here. I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound of his family. His story has a tragic ending, and I think murder's a terrible thing, and my heart breaks for his wife and his kids. I think it's just horrible. It's horrible. He was killed at a gun range by a very disturbed man. But my larger point is that the story of Chris Kyle, the facts of Chris Kyle do not fit in a box. So if we're going to elevate our heroes, like this guy did in Florida, who carved in his garage a life-size bronze statue of the man, we shouldn't do so simply because we became infatuated. And we all know what it's like to be infatuated. Oh, they're so perfect and they're so pretty, and we stayed up all night talking. We just didn't even get tired, and they're just so funny. They get me, and I get them, and we're going to spend every waking minute together, and they're perfect, right? Right? We all know how that feels. Dr. Andy Thompson was talking about how there's actually some chemistry that happens. The reason that we can stay up all night talking with someone that we just fell for is because we're actually kind of high on them. There's some body chemistry taking place, and that's why they say, you want to probably wait that out to make sure at the end of that the person that you see is the same person that was here at the beginning. You want to make sure that the facts of the person are just as good, if not better, than the idea of the person. But we're all guilty of binary thinking, right? Binary thinking, yes, no, A, B, either or, good, bad, black, white, no room for ambiguity, especially when it comes to our heroes. But the fact is, and you and we all know this, the truth is usually a lot more complicated, but the real story, the reality of it is really a lot more interesting, don't you think? It's a richer portrait when we see it in 3 dimensions. So why are so many of us 0% interested? I think it's because people became infatuated with the idea of Chris Kyle. It's an idea they see as beautiful. And the reality just gets a whole lot messier. People don't like messy, they want it clean, they want it neat, and guys like me, people like you, we rain on the parade, right? All right, fine, it's a film. Let's talk about somebody else for just a second. Who's somebody who's so above reproach they could never, ever, ever warrant criticism by anyone, anywhere? Perhaps. Now, you do this in my part of the country, in Oklahoma, and you don't get a verbal response. It's body language. It starts with a chin. They go, "She's off limits, man. That's Mother Teresa." It's weird. It's a bizarre phenomenon. Mother Teresa. You don't jack with that woman's reputation. That's Mother Teresa. They say it over and over like a cadence. Blessed Teresa of Calcutta, the Roman Catholic agent of kindness, goodwill, love, peace, help, and harmony, founder of the Missionaries of Charity, recipient of the 1979 Nobel Peace Prize, pure of heart, pure of spirit, a saint, an icon A legend. Who would ever point an unflattering finger in her direction? She's Mother Teresa. She was beatified back in 2003 after her death, 6 years after her death. Now, beatification is when the Catholic Church recognizes that someone's entered heaven and they can then intercede on your behalf. So you can actually say prayers to Mother Teresa and she will intercede for you. And it's part of the road to sainthood. I think it's a 5-step process. And it normally is supposed to take quite a period of time to get beatified, but they just fast-tracked her ass right in there. It took about a year. And then she became Blessed Mother Teresa, right? But how much do we really know about Mother Teresa? I mean, let's conduct a little personal experiment in our minds. 3 facts, only 3 about Mother Teresa that don't include her birthplace or the fact she was Catholic or a nun. She helps poor people. And she's Catholic, and she loves poor people, and she's a nun. How much did I really know about Mother Teresa when I once would have rushed to her defense? Where'd she come from? What did she do? What the hell is the Missionaries of Charity? It sounds amazing. What is that organization? What's that about? What was that Nobel Prize for? And what actions and or words specifically made her so beloved? Mother Teresa was a friend of the poor. Everybody knows that. But wait a minute, did I know that or was I sold that? Did I assume, which of course makes an ass out of you and me. Hitch, of course, did a lot of writing about Mother Teresa, and he said it outright. Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor. She was a friend of poverty. She said suffering was a gift from God. And all right, I'm a huge Hitch fan, but yeah, I know he can be kind of an asshole. So maybe he's being a little hard on her, so I did some digging. And guess what? He was absolutely right. There's an article that was posted back in '97 in the Baltimore Sun, where Mother Teresa had said that rigorous poverty is a safeguard for them. She embraced poverty as a life condition, and in fact, she required all of her charges at the Missionaries of Charity to take a vow of poverty so they could simplify their lives and they could relate to the poorest of the poor. There was a woman named Susan Shields. She was a volunteer at the Missionaries of Charity for almost a decade. If you look at that third blue box, she said there was a belief the sisters have leverage over God by choosing to suffer. Their suffering makes God happy. He then dispenses more grace to humanity. Suffering is a necessary trigger so that God can do his amazing work in our lives. A quote from Mother Teresa: "There is something beautiful in seeing the poor accept their lot. To suffer it like Christ's passion, the world gains much from their suffering." Well, wait a minute. I thought she was supposed to alleviate suffering. I thought that's what compassion was. Why would you cultivate and celebrate suffering? The Missionaries of Charities are not hospitals. They're what Mother Teresa herself called houses of the dying, a place essentially where the ailing and the destitute could go to be housed and prayed for, okay? Sally Warner was a registered nurse and a volunteer. She called it a place where people just show up, lay down on a cot, and many times just rot away, just rotted. It's an article in the Huffington Post recently. A new study by Canadian academics said Mother Teresa was a product of hype who housed the poor in sick and shoddy conditions despite her access to a fortune, right? A product of hype. She had access to huge purses, but her people were living like this, under her care, under the temperature that she had sort of set for the Missionaries of Charity. When the conditions were revealed, public pressure forced the Missionaries of Charity in Calcutta to close down, but they reopened 2 years later. Same cots for the patients, no permanent doctors on staff, no permanent nurses on staff, no diagnosis for every patient in the door, no rehab programs. Here's the men's restroom in the House of the Dying in Calcutta. This is granted before the renovation, but afterwards it ain't all that much better. Is this truly compassionate? Is this truly how we should care for the poor? and the suffering. Volunteers and ex-associates saying people lived in deplorable conditions, lying in their own shit. They washed syringes with tap water. There were nuns giving meds. Not trained physicians, not trained healers, but nuns. Single visits by a physician whose qualifications were not known. Lice infestations or shaving everybody's head. Children without any interaction with the world, just kind of growing up without really being raised or taught. And sometimes some violence inside those walls. Horrible stuff. Here's a picture from Shanty Dan, a home for the mentally ill located in Calcutta. You can see they've sort of chained her to the window. And that's how she was handled. 2005, a British television crew filmed children at Daya Dan, a care center. The kids were tied to their beds. Questions rising about the primitive practices and lack of using modern methods of teaching. Their words. Here's a shot taken by a volunteer named Megan Von Tersch of Portland State. She said, when they're done with the surgical gloves, they wash them and they hang them up on clips and they use them the next day. This is happening regularly at the houses of the dying, the missionaries of charity. And again, this is something that Mother Teresa herself set up. Physical care, not a big priority. If you're treated, it's largely by people with no medical training, and instead of trying to effectively cure the diseases and mend the wounds to make you physically whole, you're essentially pushed toward believing in Jesus. If you happen to die, it is a beautiful death. This is the thinking. Sister Glenda, the head of Nirmal Herde, the House of the Dying, said herself they had a 40% fatality rate at her facility. 40% of the people who went in the door never came out. And essentially the idea and the attitude and the mission is this: accept your fate, accept my deity. If you recover, awesome. If not, well, at least you died in the loving arms of Jesus Christ. And what, do you think this was a hospital? Of course, that brings about a wonderful question. What stops them from starting a hospital? Certainly money is not a problem. This quote from the book The Final Verdict, which came out in 2002. It was an article in the Washington Post that said, "Why to many critics Mother Teresa's no saint?" Allegations of the misuse of funds, poor medical treatment, and religious evangelicalism in the institutions she founded. Now remember, she's saying we need to suffer so God can be awesome. Suffering is beautiful. But when Mother Teresa got sick, she sought the most advanced modern medical treatment available for herself, visiting world-renowned clinics in the U.S., Europe, and India. Wait a minute. It's a shade of Mother Teresa I was not familiar with. And then her associations with people like this guy, Charles Keating. He's famous from the savings and loan scandal. The cost to taxpayers north of $3 billion. He ended up doing prison time. When Mother Teresa came to our country, she got to tool around the nation on his jet. Charles Keating gave her the jet to fly around on. Whoa, suffering? Suffering? How many of you came on a private jet? Now here's an awesome little anecdote in regard to Charles Keating. During the sentencing phase of his trial, Mother Teresa wrote a letter to Judge Lance Ito on his behalf, coming to his defense. And she said this, and I've highlighted, "I do not know anything about Mr. Charles Keating's work or his business or the matters you're dealing with. I only know he's always been kind and generous to God's poor and always ready to help whenever there was a need." Isn't that sweet? Well, this is really sweet. The response from Deputy District Attorney Paul Turley, who said this in a letter. Hey, ask yourself what Jesus would do if he were in possession of money that had been stolen. What Jesus would do if he were being exploited by a thief to ease his conscience. I submit Jesus would promptly and unhesitatingly return the stolen property to its rightful owners, and you should do the same. And her response was nothing. Silence. Certainly no returned funds. She just took the money. Financial ties to the corrupt Duvalier family of Haiti took millions from them. And They tortured people, they murdered people, they were an oppressive, monstrous regime. When asked how much the Missionaries of Charity gets, Sister Nermal, in a rare media interview, as reported in Forbes magazine, said, "Countless. God knows he is our banker." Wait, how can the funds be countless and people be living in those horrible, awful conditions? Let's look at this in relation. The Catholic Church's annual operating budget in the USA is $170 billion, just in the States. Apple's operating budget globally is $150 billion. You got to tell me they were forced to have those conditions for the suffering? I just don't buy it. What about her beatification? Certainly, Mother Teresa, of all people, was an agent of God's miraculous power here on earth, right? Well, there was an article in the Times of India where researchers from Montreal and some other places said, and actually her hallowed image doesn't really measure up when you look at the facts, not the idea. And here's the story in short. In order to be beatified, you must be involved directly in a miracle of some kind. You have to be involved in a miracle, and there must be documentation of that miracle, and then you are now qualified to be nominated for beatification, all right? Well, there was a miracle, and it went like this. Monica Bezra of Calcutta, I believe, reported she'd been cured of a tumor after she had a medallion bearing Mother Teresa's image, and she held it to her stomach and prayed, and the cancer was cured. And the church was all over that shit. It's a miracle involving Mother Teresa. What they neglected to mention, especially within the Catholic Church, is at that time she was being treated by doctors and was taking medication for the condition. That seems like a pretty big omission, don't you think? Besides, if you want to see a genuine miracle involving Mother Teresa, check that out. I mean, that's all you need. Right there. It's the nun bun. Tell me that those little undulations in the dough just happened by chance. That's divine providence. So after the beatification takes place, Mother Teresa is dead and gone. All right. Well, the young woman who had been part of the miracle said after the miracle, they'd made a lot of promises, right? They'd made a lot of promises and assured me of financial help for my livelihood and my kids. They were going to take care of us. After that, after the beatification, they forgot me, and I am living in penury. I'm living in extreme poverty. They said, thanks for the help. Bye. Pretty big part of the Mother Teresa beatification story. I think so. And finally, I don't mean to make a whole speech about her, but I'm fascinated, and I think she provides a great sort of object lesson. Released in 2003 was a book of letters compiled. They were written by Mother Teresa to superiors and colleagues over the span of 66 years. They were published in the form of a book called Mother Teresa, Come Be My Life. And she wrote about private unbelief. Such deep longing, empty, no faith, no love, no zeal. Saving souls holds no attraction. She'd said at one point in a letter in that book, and it is published, please pray specially for me that I may not spoil his work and that our Lord may show himself, for there's such terrible darkness within me, as if everything was dead. She wrote this in 1953. It's been like this more or less from the time I started. Wait a minute. Mother Teresa might not have believed in God? Holy shit. Holy shit. Now, speak to someone who has taken the idea of Mother Teresa into their hearts and suggest she might have had a dark side. And what's the reaction? Dr. Andy Thompson, actually, it was having a conversation with him. He was gracious enough to just write this in a letter to me and allow me to use it. The reason people get freaky is because they take personal affront to your criticism. At a deep emotional level, you attack their mother, their grandmother, their aunt, their older sister, and all the real and longed-for caretakers in their lives. How dare you attack the person who represents the actual idealized attachment figures buried in their mind? It's kind of the thing where, you know what? You're not allowed to criticize my kids. I can. You can't. You're not allowed to criticize my grandmother. I can. You're not qualified. You keep your mouth shut. We fell in love with the idea. We've come to take it personally. I'll spare you all the talk of confirmation bias, the likes and dislikes, how we protect cherished beliefs. We all know about in-group bias and favoritism and how it is part of our social identity. People naturally getting upset when you criticize their grandmother. They sometimes freak out even more when you go after their father or their father. In my country, many times, they get upset when you go after the founding fathers, or in reference to it a moment ago. Many believed, allegedly, in a heavenly father. There was a recent poll done by the Public Policy Polling Organization. They polled Republicans. 57% of those polled, north of 1,000 people, I think, on the poll, supported Christianity established as the national religion because they believe we were founded to be so by believing founding fathers. Does that line up with the facts? Does the idea jive with the facts? There's a great story they used to tell us when I was very, very small about George Washington, our first president, and the cherry tree. And the story is so unbelievably sad and simple. It goes like this. George Washington's out there, and for some reason he grabs an axe and he chops down the cherry tree. And his father comes out, and George is totally busted in the middle of the act. He does it, and his dad catches him, and he looks up with those saintly cherub eyes, and he says, "I cannot tell a lie." And of course, this was used to sort of deify the man. George Washington, a man of integrity, he could not lie, even in an event just innocuous as this, you know. Of course, George Washington's "I cannot tell a lie" is a lie. It was bogus. It was made up years after by a guy who was pushing morality tales to a generation. Many of our founding fathers, slave owners, many had kids, extramarital affairs, and fathered children with slaves, many not Christian. Many outright rejecting the Bible, and yet we're supposedly a Christian nation, people not bothering to read our own Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The Treaty of Tripoli, the government of the United States, is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. You bring this fact to someone who's fallen in love with the idea of a Christian nation, and they just look at you and say, "America, America. Yes, we are a Christian nation." Speaks to something called belief perseverance. We stick with the initial belief even after we get contradictory or disconfirming evidence. Shermer's done some writing about this in his book, The Believing Brain. Beliefs come first, explanations follow. I do love my country. I think it's okay to be a patriot. I mean, I'm not a nationalist, but I think it's okay to love where you're from and to hold some pride in that. I also think that a true patriot has to be prepared to be honest about the facts of the problems in your nation and to openly criticize and work to fix what's broken inside your nation. I also think you must also, as much as being a citizen of your nation, work to be a citizen of the world. I think those things are important. But if we're going to wave the banners, you know, not just our nation's banners, but our religious banners. I grew up in a school, private school. We used to say a pledge to this Christian flag every morning, 6 times a day. Every class, hand over heart. They'd bring all of us little minnows into class, and we'd take prayer requests, and then they'd bring the flag out, and they'd hold it out like this, and we'd stand up, hand over heart, and say the pledge. "I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior for whose kingdom it stands. One Savior, crucified, risen, and coming again to give life and liberty to all who believe." Tell me the power of childhood indoctrination doesn't work. It's been 30 years, I still know every word. I pledge allegiance to the Bible, God's holy word. I will make it a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path, and I will hide its words in my heart that I might not sin against God. The greatest book ever written, the good book. Did I know that information, or had I fallen in love with the idea of Scripture? Had I looked at the messy facts of the Bible? And of course, we talk about those things, we sound the alarm. The response so often is this, and then they look us in the eye and say, "Hey, can I pour you a cup of shut the hell up?" It's frustrating. I used to have a bad idea about evolution, right? It would just simplify it. Goo to the zoo to you. That's what you think we are. That's all we are. Well, actually, some truth in that, but never mind. And of course, with all of the reputable apologists defending creation out there, it's very difficult. I did a couple of videos on the guy in the red ball cap. You guys know who that is? I try not to throw up in my mouth a little bit, but his name is Joshua Feuerstein. He's having his 15 minutes of fame on the internet, and it's just a train wreck. I didn't think about evolution in this sense. I thought about evolution, and I thought this. Bad idea. Bad information. I didn't have the facts. I'm all about ideas, but I want to live in a world with good ideas, ideas that are based around and always chasing the facts. And you know, we're not immune, folks. In the free thought culture, atheist agnostics, you know, many of us have declared that all religious people are stupid. Oh, they're stupid. Bunch of dumbasses. Many times they use phrases that I just despise. They call them names like religitard or creatard. God, I die inside when I hear it. It's just such an unproductive language. It's so uncompassionate. You know, it's just wrong. And yeah, I had somebody send this to me online. They posted it on my Facebook page. And they said, atheist, a thoughtful, honest, ethical, intelligent, skeptical thinker. God, I wish that was true. I wish it was true. Of course, I have people all the time in my email inbox who are married to bizarre, strange, completely unsubstantiated ideas. And they're atheists. They don't believe in God. We don't even know if people come to atheism for rational reasons. Maybe they were just born atheists, never thought about it. Maybe they accepted the belief in no God because of a crazy reason. I mean, we're not immune to bad ideas and embracing bad ideas over good facts. There's a phenomenon called Spinoza's conjecture based on the work of Dutch philosopher Benedict Spinoza that says it's actually harder to reject bad information once we've understood the information in the first place. We understand something, that's step one. Now to analyze and reject it and get rid of it, that's a whole other process, and it's harder for us to do. In other words, we say, I reject your reality and substitute my own. The quote from H.L. Mencken that says, the most costly of all follies is to believe passionately in the palpably not true. It's the chief occupation of mankind. So how do we keep from believing in bad ideas and pursuing and embracing them? Well, of course, we've got the scientific method, probably the best tool we have for trying to remove our constant human biases. To separate good ideas from bad ideas, fact from fiction, the substantiated from the unsubstantiated. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to believe. I want to believe. More than that, I want to know. Is that a spaceship or was that some cat off the screen throwing a hat? I really do. I want to know. Even if the facts get messy. I want to be about ideas, but I want to be about the facts. And I think we can see our world as it really is and find awe and wonder and beauty and joy. We can discover people and things worth admiring, worth celebrating. We can be and feel connected to the goodness all around us. We can embrace ideas that are always in search of the facts, and we can still be inspired, and we can do so without the cheat of ignorance. As Carl Sagan once said, it's far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. Or if you'll indulge me as I quote the great philosopher Gervais, ignorance might be bliss for the ignorant, but for the rest of us, it's a fucking pain in the ass. My friends, I really think the truth is out there. I used to think there were some things that are unknowable. You know, I don't know that. Let's go pursue it, right? My desire to know is greater than my desire to believe. I want to be about the facts, and I want to be about good ideas that chase the facts, always. Besides, my friends, when you think about the implications and the dangers of living our lives in blissful ignorance, wouldn't you really want to know? Thank you very much for having me today.